I am trying not to go broke doing this because I also need to put some money into my work rig, the Dodge Journey I have. So hopefully the next couple things that are going to go on with this car are easy as shit and I won't have to dump a whole bunch of more money into it. Alright guys, so this video is going to be pretty much the origin story of my '06 Chevy Cobalt. So before we even get into what I've done to it, let me give you guys a little bit of the car's history. So in 2006, my grandma bought it for, I don't know, whatever Chevy Cobalts went for back in 2006. I'm sure it was probably like 20 grand. It had 0 miles on it. My grandma barely drove. So from 2006 to, I want to say, about 2013 or so, she drove it. She probably racked up 30,000 miles in that little time frame there. She then gave it to my aunt. My aunt drove it from 2013 to about 2016, and then she gave it to my cousin. At that point, there was probably, I want to say 40,000 miles, maybe 50. She gave it to my cousin. My cousin drove it around for roughly 6 months until he got a newer and better car, and then he gave it back to my aunt. My aunt drove it around for a couple more months and then gave it to my uncle, and my uncle had it from 2016 until the day it landed in my lap. Now, from 2016 to the day it landed in my lap, my uncle drove the car into the ground. I'm talking about like anything outside of general maintenance, like an oil change, tires, putting gas in it. Those are probably like the 3 most basic things that he ever did to that car. So back in early December of 2022, this past year, I went over to my uncle's house just to hang out for a minute. And as I was coming into his house, I saw the car and saw that it was in desperate need of a paint correction. I have an eye for that. I detail cars for a living. So I brought it up to him. I pretty much told him, I was like, hey, this is what I can do to the car. I can make it look really nice. This is the price and everything. And he didn't want to bite on it because my price was probably too high. And then he started telling me about little here and there things that were wrong with the car. Essentially, the mass airflow sensor was messed up and the throttle body was messed up, and he pretty much thought it was the transmission. Now, I've said it once and I'll say it again. I'm by no means a mechanic, but I know how to do a throttle body and a mass airflow sensor. So I told him, I said, if you want to buy the parts and kick me 50 bucks, I'll do it. He didn't bite on it again because he was broke at the time, and he kind of let it go. Well, a couple weeks later, he calls me and he says, hey, do you want to buy the car? And I said, well, what's wrong with it? He says, it's the transmission, and explains the problems again. And I said, no, that's the throttle body and the mass airflow sensor. He says, no, it's the transmission, it's the transmission. I said, okay, well, how much do you want for it? He said, the local junkyard offered me 200 bucks. I said, well, I got $100 in my pocket right now, and I'll come take it off your hands if you want it. And he said, come over. So I ended up driving to my grandma's house where it was parked because it broke down. I did a little walk around. I got in the car. I started it. There was a check engine light. I took it over to AutoZone and hooked it up to a code reader, and sure as shit, it's the mass airflow sensor and the throttle body. So I handed him the $100. I thankfully got it to my house. It was bucking. A bunch of other problems were wrong with it. And when I say bucking, I mean it was like wanting to stall out the transmission and everything. Anyways, I get it to my house. I do a very general clean on the inside. I'll go ahead and pop up a TikTok video of me doing it really quick. So after installing the throttle body and mass airflow sensor, it needed an oil change because that's usually one of the first things I do, regardless of if somebody says they recently just did an oil change on the car they sold me. I go ahead and just do it anyways. So I went to this shop that I hadn't been to before. It's out here in Anderson, California. It's called Anderson Automotive. These guys did a really great job. They did an oil change and I think it's a 45-point inspection where they go through your car and they just kind of list off everything that's wrong with it, and they kind of categorize it in stuff that you should fix first and things that can wait. So I'll go ahead and pop up a quick video of that. Anyways, as you could see, the thing that needed to be fixed the most was probably those engine and transmission mounts. So I almost had given up on the car at that point because I've never done engine and transmission mounts before, and a lot of this stuff I had never done before at all. I think somewhere in here I forgot to mention that I had no intentions of keeping this car. So I was trying to sell it. But in order to sell the vehicle, I had to fix the vehicle at least enough to sell it. So I ended up calling my stepdad, and he made it sound like the engine and transmission mounts were going to be really easy. So that weekend, I went out there with the parts, and we got to it. The engine mount on the top of the engine came out super easy. It was just, you take off the air box, you take off some of the screws, and it comes right out. You gotta obviously jack the engine up and everything. And then we moved on to the transmission mounts. Altogether, between both the engine and front and rear transmission mount, we were out there for 8 hours wrenching on everything. I guess Chevy Cobalt's just the frame runs through the area where the rear transmission mount goes, so it's like kind of hard to finagle it into a position where you can like flip it and pull it out. So that was like one of the hardest things that had. After the engine and transmission mounts, the car started running a whole lot better. There still was the bucking coming from the transmission, and basically what would happen is when it would shift gears, it would pretty much just slam it into the next gear. So I ended up taking it back to Anderson Automotive for them to test and see if it was going to be safe for them to flush the transmission like how they usually would. I ended up getting a free transmission flush that day because they called me back and told me they had just flushed it without my consent, and I didn't have money. I was only taking it in there so they could see that, so they could test drive it pretty much. I was gonna pay for it out of my next paycheck from work, but they ended up waiving that $350 fee, so that was pretty cool. Now, in between fixing some of the next couple mechanical problems I'm about to list off, I did a couple little personal touches to the car, I guess you could say. The front door speakers from the jump never worked, so I went to O'Reilly's and just got some cheapo 6.5-inch speakers from them and installed those. And then I got some NTX subs off of Facebook Marketplace. I actually traded it for a detail, and then I installed that. Got the amp and everything, got everything all hooked up, and finally got some music going in the car, which was really rewarding because I was driving around for weeks with a little Bluetooth speaker in the car, just sitting in the passenger seat. So the next thing I kind of dove into was the suspension. I needed struts and inner tie rods, and then I also had to pay my homeboy Russell to put them on because, again, I've never done that before. So between the next couple weeks of paychecks from my job over at Vans, I bought the parts and had Russell install them, and I think I need to do the wheel bearings now. I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to take it in for an inspection probably at the beginning of next week and kind of go from there. But basically what happens is when I get above, I want to say like 55, the front left tire kind of like rattles, and that's not safe, I don't think. So yeah, I'm gonna take that in and kind of get that figured out. Now the next two things I did was the serpentine belt and the brake fluid flush. The serpentine belt was kind of a pain in the ass because I have fat guy arms, and the space to get your arm up in to the tensioner pulley is about yay big in these cars, and it sucks. It took like an hour, honestly. I'm not even gonna lie. It took like a good hour and a half to get that serpentine belt in and out. And then I really messed up on the brake fluid flush. I got everything jacked up. I started with the rear, and immediately I stripped the bolt for the bleeder valve. So I drained that side through the line itself, and then did everything all the way around, what I thought was right, and I guess it wasn't, because the next morning I went to go to a doctor's appointment and went to go stop at a stop sign, and my car barely stopped. So I immediately took it over to Anderson Automotive and had them flush it. Months, and then started to debate whether I wanted to do a full paint correction on the car and really bring out the black in that paint again, or if I wanted to rewrap it and what color I wanted to rewrap it. And I finally decided that I was going to wrap it the army green that's on it right now. I really thought that I was going to be able to finish the wrap within 30 days, but I bought the wrap back in April and it is now June, and the things that still need to be done are the pillars to the quarters, the rear quarters I should say, and then both the front and the rear bumper. I did that backwards. The front and the rear bumper. But no, it's been a challenge. I didn't really account for mess ups or anything, so I've had to order 2 more rolls of wrap since then. I can kind of see why people don't have very many good things to say about Vivid, though it is cost effective. It's kind of hard to work with as well. So when you're squeegeeing and everything, it just like kind of wants to bind into itself and crinkle up and everything, and it just makes it really hard. My roof is probably the worst panel on my car right now. I'm probably gonna go back and redo it at some point. I'll kind of show you guys at some point. Alright, so to end the video, we're going to do a quick recap on what everything actually costed me. So, obviously the car itself was a $100 bill. The engine and transmission mounts were $100 for the parts, and then I gave my stepdad $150. The AC compressor was $75. I gave Russell, actually I bought Russell a subwoofer for that for $250, and then it was $100 at Jiffy Lube to charge the system with Freon. I fucked up the brake fluid for $15, and then Anderson Automotive fixed my fuck up for $150. Anderson Automotive gave me a free transmission flush. What else? I'm reading from a list right now. I bought the struts and the tie rods for, I want to say, $200, and then Russell put everything together for $100. The serpentine belt was $20. I put it in by myself. The speakers, the amp, and the door speakers for the car altogether were $300. The headlights, I want to say, were between $80 and $100. The wrap altogether, all 3 times that I've ordered it, was $800. For all 4 wheels I have on the car, that was $525. And then I think so far, between general maintenance and all of that, aside from what I've cleaned, I think that's pretty much everything I've done to the car so far. So to end the video, I'll go ahead and do a couple clips or pictures of what it looks like right now. I don't want to get too into it because I want that to be like kind of another video itself, but here it is.